The room is dim. The camera glides through a tiny San Francisco apartment where two young designers stare at an eviction notice taped to their door. Their rent is due, in a city where rent never shows mercy. Outside, the world moves fast. Inside, time feels painfully slow. This is the moment people later call fate, but back then, it was just fear. Brian Chesky and Gebbia sit on their floor, surrounded by sketches, unpaid bills, and the weight of dreams that never quite landed. Yet in the middle of that chaos, something strange happens. Ideas are almost embarrassingly small. A design conference is coming to town. Hotels are sold out. What if they turn their living room into a makeshift bed and breakfast? What if survival could be redesigned? What they didn't know was that this tiny spark, this act of desperation, would ignite a revolution. But revolutions don't announce themselves. They begin quietly, like a whispered thought, like two broke friends blowing up air mattresses the night before strangers arrive, like a decision nobody will understand until much, much later. On that floor, in that cramped apartment, the seed of $1 billion future was planted, not by gay news, not by wealth, but by necessity. And so we begin a story that doesn't start with confidence or strategy or investors throwing money. It starts with fear, uncertainty, and a question people rarely ask out loud. How far can a simple idea go when the world tells you it's too small to matter? Because sometimes, the most extraordinary journeys begin at rock bottom. And sometimes, the thing that saves you isn't luck, it's the belief that maybe, just maybe, there's another way. This is how two young men, armed with airbeds and a wild idea, unknowingly stepped into the first chapter of a global phenomenon. A story that would one day redefine travel, trust, and the meaning of home. Before Airbnb became a global force, it was nothing more than an experiment between friends. Brian Chesky and Gebbia had come to San Francisco with dreams of becoming designers, creators, entrepreneurs, anything except failures. Yet life in the city hit them brutally. Rent was suffocating, job prospects were thin, and their families quietly wondered when they'd come back home. But Brian and Joe had something more powerful than security, a stubborn refusal to quit. That design conference weekend, the first guests arrived packing backpacks and uncertainty, curious about what airbed and breakfast even meant. Brian and Joe offered them breakfast, Wi-Fi, and conversation. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even a business. It was an idea dressed in hope. The guests loved the experience. They felt connected in a way hotels never offered. The founders took notes. Something was happening. But when they tried to scale their little experiment, reality hit them again. No one took them seriously. They launched their website. Nothing happened. They emailed investors, nobody replied. One investor famously told them, "I hope you're working on something else." The rejection was endless. Then came the infamous cereal box hustle. They designed the limited edition cereals Obama O's and Kapan McCain's during the 2008 election. They sold them for $40 a box to raise money. It was ridiculous. It was desperate. And yet, it worked. This scrappy determination caught the eye of Y Combinator's Paul Graham. He didn't invest because he thought Airbnb was brilliant. He invested because the founders wouldn't give up. Hilater aside, these guys created their own funding out of cereal. They'll figure anything out. With Y Combinator's help, they rebuilt the product, visited hosts in person, and crafted trust systems like reviews and verification ideas that now seem obvious but were revolutionary at the time. Bit by bit, city by city, Airbnb grew from a quirky concept to a global movement. And behind every moment of growth was a lesson etched in blood and rejection. Nobody believed in them until the world had no choice. As the platform expanded, the world began to shift. Travelers no longer wanted sterile rooms. They craved connection, authenticity, a sense of belonging. Airbnb became the bridge. From tree houses in Costa Rica to tiny apartments in Tokyo, the world opened its doors. Hosts found side income. Travelers found new experiences. And the founders Brian Chesky, Joe Gebbia, and Nathan Blecherchik found themselves at the center of a global transformation. The company attracted massive funding. Investors who once ignored them now fought to get in. Airbnb's valuation soared into the billions. The founders became symbols of a new era of entrepreneurship, creators of a platform that didn't own rooms, buildings, or hotels, yet reshaped the entire travel industry. They became billionaires not by building properties, but by building trust, community, and a new kind of economy. But success didn't come without storms. Cities pushed back. Governments imposed regulations. Critics warned that Airbnb was disrupting more than travel, it was reshaping neighborhoods and housing markets. The company navigated lawsuits, protests, and political battles in every corner of the world. Yet each challenge strengthened their resolve. They pushed forward, focusing on quality, safety, and innovation. Their mission, belong anywhere, became a cultural phenomenon. Then, in 2020, the unthinkable happened. The pandemic brought global travel to a full stop. Bookings collapsed by 80% in a matter of weeks. Airbnb faced an existential crisis. Layoffs tore through the company. Headlines predicted their downfall. For a moment, it looked like the story was over. But great companies are forged in their darkest chapters. The founders redesigned Airbnb again, leaner, more focused, built for resilience rather than speed. They shifted toward long-term stays, local travel, and flexible living. Slowly, the platform recovered. Then came December 2020, Airbnb's IPO. What should have been the end was instead the rebirth. The stock exploded. It became one of the most iconic IPOs in tech history. The founders who once inflated airbeds in desperation now stood on the global stage, billionaires who had survived the impossible. The story of Airbnb is more than a tech success. It is a reminder of the fragile and powerful human instinct to keep going when logic says stop. Brian and Joe didn't plan to build a global empire. They planned to pay their rent. Yet from that simple intention came a movement that transformed how millions of people travel and connect. Their journey is proof that the biggest revolutions don't begin with grand ambitions. They begin with small acts of courage. Look closely at their path. The early failures, the strange cereal box experiment, the endless investor rejections, the late nights spent fixing code, the gritty determination to understand customers, and the near-death moments where everything seemed lost. These are not the signs of luck. They are the fingerprints of persistence. Their story tells us that ideas don't need to be perfect. They need to be believed in. They need to be carried, protected, and fought for when no one else sees the vision. When Airbnb finally reached the stock market, the world watched a company once built on air mattresses become a symbol of modern entrepreneurship. The founder's net worth soared into the billions. But the true victory wasn't money, it was validation. It was the moment the world said, "We see you now." And yet, the lesson is not about wealthy, it's about possibility. If two struggling designers can transform their apartment into the seed of a global revolution, then what small idea in your life might be waiting for its moment? What air mattress are you ignoring? What tiny spark could become your defining story? Every era has its invention that redefines how people live. Airbnb wasn't just a company. It was a reminder that innovation doesn't always come from power or privilege. Sometimes it comes from desperation. Sometimes from creativity. Sometimes from believing in something that seems ridiculous.